We are Europhile, which is starting now. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Europhile Live, an impromptu, situation. It's really hot. Maddie is sweltering,
It is.
in wherever you are, Maddie.
Well, yeah, it's the hottest day of the summer in the UK right now, so it's not an absolute temperature record,
So
but
this
it,
is
it is very hot.
it's an act of love what you're doing, Maddie. This is the whole thing. Okay, of getting information out there.
Yep.
But I mean, it's really hot. Before we begin with tonight's topic, which will be looking at narratives, we're looking at, right, Russian and Chinese narratives that are running through Europe right now, also in North America, in Canada, for example, due to the referendum that has been called, or the referendum of the referendum. We'll get into that a little later. Let's just go through some news while we're waiting for Dietmar Pichler, who will be joining us, to talk about this as well. First things off, they're still voting, in Clacton, right, Maddie?
Yes. So it'll be interesting, but no matter how it turns out, I think there will be positive things to come. Well, if campaign phase wins, then obviously that's good.
Yeah,
But even if he doesn't, then Farage will still get his spot in the parliament, which means that the investigation will
yeah,
proceed as usual.
exactly. He had a bit of a respite,
Yeah.
so he probably used his time very well, to hide whatever is out there. That's my take on it. Okay, I have no proof, obviously, but I would suspect, that's the case. Okay, so that's the first one. Then there was a real big brouhaha of Putin, who was visiting the Kuril Islands, and Japan. Was very, uh, let's say, vociferous, saying that this was a provocation. Maddie, can you explain it a little bit, because you know the situation very well?
Sure. So the history of Kuril Islands is as complicated as any other border dispute between Russia and all the other countries. The islands became a part of well, historically they were part of Japan, but the control over the islands solidified after the Russo-Japanese War. But they were occupied by the Soviet Union after the end of World War II, and the border agreement between the Soviet Union and then later Russia was never finalized with Japan. Some even say that technically modern day Russia and Japan are still at war because
Yeah.
the Japanese still lay claim to those islands, which
Hmm.
means that any kind of visit to the disputed territory by the Russian president is indeed an act of provocation because an
Sure.
agreement or a settlement was never reached. Something tells me that it was potentially done to uh, appease Beijing and to apply pressure
That's my
on
take on it. Well,
yeah,
that's what I think. Yeah.
and to apply pressure on Japan because Russia cannot really afford a second front war.
No.
Uh, but this is a reverie, so to speak, in Beijing's direction. Like a royal
Mhm.
vassal, they will do what Beijing wants
Uh-huh.
them to do.
That's right. They're also Putin has been trying to get Xi to sign off on Siberia too, which is not happening, not yet. And we also know that that whole area is an area where, it's, let's say, the Arctic gateway. So a gateway to the Arctic. So it's an extremely extreme. It's a hot spot that we keep our eye on as well. All right. Putin also dressed up as a little naval officer today and did a little bit of a film, in his little bunker. So that was another thing that has been circulating widely. Um, Also, there's a lot of videos circulating of North Korean and Chinese laborers that now are flooding into Russia. They have a problem with labor. Correct, Madi? I know that you're looking at this as well.
Yes, Russia has been experiencing labor shortage for quite a while, but the current spike is a bit interesting because it is done in larger numbers now. It's not a new phenomenon, but it's done now in larger numbers ahead of what many people speculate will be a mobilization this coming fall, right after the elections into the state Duma.
Yeah.
Uh, and we had private conversations, you and I, about this because no matter what the numbers are for mobilization, be it 300,000 again or something
Yeah,
outlandish as 1 million.
some sort of
It,
number.
those numbers are still quite difficult for the Russians to accomplish, not for military logistics or all the other reasons, which are real, but for simple economic reasons. They don't have spare capacity in the labor market to simply rip out so much people out of the economy. So I think this influx of foreign labor, Chinese and North Korean, is done to alleviate uh, this pressure point ahead of mobilization.
Yeah, and this has been building for quite a long time.
Yep.
We've seen during the winter, for example, an influx, of Chinese workers into the Russian East, for
Yep.
example, Far East, and in droves in large, large numbers. We've also seen them up in Murmansk, okay, as well, and plane loads of ladies from laborers, female laborers from North Korea that are being brought in, and I can imagine that's just slave labor. Oh, Maddie, I was looking at videos. I've started a new obsession of looking at North Korean videos, trying to get a handle on everything, and they are actually shocking. I know that I'm late to the game on that one. I knew it was like that, but I mean, it's something that is over the top. So these female laborers who are coming over, I'm sure they're just locked up in the factory. They can't go anywhere. They're probably no everything is restricted for them.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they're being paid or not.
Well,
Apparently, the Russians say they are.
it's a North Korea is as centrally planned as a centrally planned comes, which means every single citizen get assigned a job. So if
Every
the dear leader, the supreme marshal of North
Yeah,
Korea, tells a North Korean citizen to go work in Russia, that's exactly what they will do.
that's it. That's it. Exactly. That's what struck me as I was watching these videos, and they have to say in each frame, it's for our dear leader. No, we are doing this in honor of our dear leader, and he's going to take care of us, and all of that kind of thing. It's actually quite incredible to hear, and the reactions, obviously, from Western journalists that get access into North Korea, which I believe are very very few, and everyone's got their minder with them. They're allowed, it's a Potemkin kind of visit that they're brought to. Another thing too, a reminder for everybody that we'll probably do something in the fall about this. There's a referendum in Alberta. If anybody is not paying attention to that part of the world, in Alberta, Canada, let's say now they call themselves separatists. It would be secession. They managed to get a referendum, which will be done on October the 19th, for a possible future referendum. And I did a deep dive for a piece that I wrote on the narratives that are circulating in that part of the world right now with the different forms of interference, foreign interference, for example, that build on, amplify a lot of what is happening, on the ground. There are, let's say, parties out there, long-standing parties that have wanted to separate. That really kicked off, I would say, after 2012. I would put it. When we know that here in Europe, for example, already there was unrest between farmers, there were yellow vests that came out, and basically it became, let's say, a much more global reaction, their reaction, stoked by, let's say, the fires of populism and that kind of thing. So that's what's going on there, and we'll keep our eye on what is happening right now. The polling is not telling us much. They have probably a core group. They call them Maple MAGA. They get upset if you talk about them that way. And I can see that Dietmar Pichler has now joined us right in, let's say, perfect segue, Dietmar. Hi, Dietmar. Dietmar has not joined us yet. He will be.
Now everything is on, but yeah, no,
There
yeah.
we go.
Hello, everybody.
Dietmar, how are
Hello.
you? How are you? How are you
Yeah,
keeping
sorry
up?
for being
Is it
late.
Victoria? Yeah, no
Now Vienna
worries.
is like the whole city is a construction site now, and unfortunately the tram let me down. But yeah, it's so good to be here finally.
great. And thank you for coming along. Yeah, in Canada, they say there are two seasons, winter and construction, because that's about the only
Yeah,
time that you can do anything, which I think is probably comparable to Austrian. No climate and what can be done, especially for snow, right? And everything, and all the climatic
totally,
conditions.
totally.
Exactly. We were just going through Dietmar, just some things that's popped up in the news just recently. Another thing that we're seeing across all of Europe, and I'd like you to also comment on this as well. That way, we can get into some of the narratives that we're seeing on Russian and Chinese, and especially how it's framed, right, and how it has been framed. I would say for good 10 to 15 years. But we're seeing a huge push across Europe of either anti-Ukraine, pro-Russian propaganda, and especially in, let's say, it's framed as a lot of operations against EU spending, okay, on defense. That's one of, let's say, the big topics. Actually, today there was a huge fire, I guess we could call it. There was an explosion at an armaments factory in Italy, in southern Italy, in an area where it's become now a hub for manufacturing arms manufacturing. The company, there's a Reuters article that's come out. The company itself is a French-German company, and they wanted also to open a second factory there. We'll see what happens. But already, I mean, at about 3:30, already, let's say the news of this with video clips had started circulating on Telegram pretty fast. And, with the explosion of the factory and already the narrative is, why are we allowing let's say, companies to build arms, to manufacture arms in our country. Okay. And this is also in conjunction with different parties, populists, left and right, in Italy, that are campaigning, all right, to stop armaments going to Ukraine. So the unilateral disarmament of Ukraine, this is what they are, I think, saying that is because we have to send peace feelers, okay, to Moscow, which is something that I know, Dietmar, you've talked about, okay, quite often. Is this something that you're seeing also across Austrian media and other media, let's say, platforms?
So first of all, thanks for having me and to pushing this topic, because the other side, if we want to call it that way, they are pushing it a lot, and they did not start today. And what we see now is partly a result of Cold War operations, active measures. And this is not because I'm a sucker for history. This is really very relevant today. And I can send it to you. There is a documentary about the peace movement
Yeah.
in Germany from the early 80s. And they made an interview with a Stasi. So this was the East German, socialist German, like KGB basically, or intelligence. Yeah, the guys who suppressed the population. And this guy said, of course, we were using the peace movement for our means. And additionally, there was a story told, and he told this story. I'm talking about an agent and not a guy who changed sides, who was inventing something, because I know there are some accusations that from the KGB agents who went to the US that they were telling,
Mm,
let's say that they made themselves a little bit bigger than they were. No, this was a guy who was just telling, he was just speaking up for his about his work back in the days, back in the good old days. And he said that, and now I'm coming to my point, that they were using East German intelligence and information about where the nukes are placed in Germany, where are the bases where they put the
mm,
nukes. And then they gave this information to a German magazine. So they published this, they published a map with all the
mhm,
dots in the map where the bases are. And what happened? The peace movement, they went there, all the demonstrators, all the rallies, all the activists, and they did their sit-ins. They did all these old American Vietnam War tactics. Yeah, not. I don't know if they already glued themselves to the floor. If this new, to be honest, yeah, maybe they also did. But this is exactly what we see now. And I'm really wondering, and we also know that there is recently, and there is a good article in the Austrian newspaper, not newspaper, weekly magazine
Hmm.
Profil
Hmm.
about, and I'm sure you also know about it. There is a communist conference in Moscow or somewhere in Russia,
Hmm.
where one of the Russian opposition parties, I mean, Kremlin aligned opposition, of course,
Hmm.
imperialistic, Russian imperialist opposition, they invited far left parties and movements from all around the world to maybe organize them, maybe do more. I don't know. Yeah. So they really care about all these old connections, and this is quite a thing because we have this anti-spending for the military movement, this
Yeah.
rearmament
Yeah.
blockers, and we have them a lot, and they do exactly the same like they did back in the old days. But because the far right is so loud about other pro-Russian narratives, some of them we don't even recognize as such. It's such EU anti-EU noise, but they also
Yeah.
spread a lot of pro-Russian tales, and sometimes they do the same as the far left. But I think we don't look enough at the peace movement at the far left and all these anti-armament Europe movements. And let me ask you one question to wrap this up. Why do they? I mean, we know that they try to block the support to Ukraine. This
Yeah.
is completely logical because Russia, of course, can more easily
Yeah.
proceed there. But why do they block our rearmament if they don't want to attack? Why do they even care? Because they know we will not attack. So if I were a completely peaceful country that just wants to grab some neighbor, I'm not interested in attacking NATO. I would say, fine, invest in your own weapons so you give less to Ukraine or you lose money if we win the competition. But they don't. They hate it. And I
Yep.
ask the question, why? Why, if they
Oh, this
don't
goes
want to
all the
talk?
this goes all the way back, Dietmar. I mean, these are narratives and ways of thinking, mindsets that were really implanted. I would say for the first with the first Comintern's that we had in the late 1919 and afterwards. So this was always the line. Remember that, and then you know this, Madi knows this, but just a reminder to everybody else. When we're talking about narratives and the way they speak, it's that the Russians and let's just call them that because basically, sure, they were Soviets, but they're Russian. Okay. There was no difference from the Tsarist period into the communist period, the so called communist period, and what we're seeing today. There's a direct line that goes all the way through. It's there when they talk about peace, it's their peace, their brand of peace, as opposed to what we are, which are warmongers. Then they talk about, for example, equality, right? Because obviously there's equality, and what do they brand us on the anti-Western side as exploiters. And that's that kind of thing. And then of course it's the workers' paradise, and now it's just the paradise because it's Mother Russia. And instead we are colonialists. And those are the three main narratives. But basically, it is let's say, a frame that they have been using for so long. It also strikes, how can I put it? It is also one of those narratives that is really, it really appeals to people also with a religious base. Okay. So people who believe are highly religious, normally they don't like, obviously, they're much more social. Let's say they're thinking more socially, thinking that these kind, let's say the funds that are being used and allotted for defense should be put in either schools. I mean, I hear this all the time. Why are we making an armaments industry? Why aren't we putting them in our schools? And why are we putting them in our health system? By the way, in Italy, the health system is that, and pensions are where they're spending the most money. We spend very, very little on defense. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing. Madi, you want to come in on this one at all? Do you have any ideas that you can
Sure.
to add?
Well, just as a historical discourse, I don't want to jump into history too much. Uh, but you said it right. The anti-Western mentality is not new. It's not even new to the Soviet period. It's not. It started in the 19th century and even before that.
Yeah.
There were some periods in Russian history, Russian Tsarist history, where they had cordial relationships with other Western empires. But in the age of nationalism of the 19th century, it changed quite significantly because after the French Revolution and the rise of Napoleon, the pro-French sentiment in Russia flipped completely because what happened in France was a threat to autocracy. The all-powerful Tsar autocrat was threatened,
Mm.
and of course, there was the French invasion of Russia in 1912. Uh, and after that, especially after the Decemberist uprising a few years later, the sentiment in Russia, at least from the imperial authority, changed significantly, where they wanted to build their own national identity that is serving in the interests of the autocrats, that are serving in the interests of the empire. And that national identity was built around opposition to the Western ideals, Western philosophy, Western liberalism. And most of the works of classic Russian literature that
Mm.
many people admire these days from the 19th century actually went through through the censorship mill of St. Petersburg, uh, where some works were even directly funded by the Tsar, so that they could actually promote a specific message that it would be
Hmm.
supporting the traditional Russian Orthodoxy view of the world, where the autocrat is there by divine right. So
Well,
and then when the Soviets took over, they just repurposed all of that uh, for their own needs, and they didn't really have to do much. They just had to strip out the Tsar, and that's about it.
yeah, they basically just replace them. It's true. All of the literature I was reading about either like Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, Pushkin, and all of those guys. It was really they were writing about St. Petersburg. They were writing about a culture that existed only there. It was the elite culture, and that's
Yep,
about it.
yep,
The way that they wanted, right? To depict it, what they
yep,
want us to see of the world. And that kind of, let's say, narrative has gone forward and has really, really impacted the way that the West sees Russia
yep,
because they talk about a big, the great, Russian culture. But if you go right down to
yep.
the brass tacks, we're talking about a very, very small portion of the population concentrated in St. Petersburg, and that's about it.
Yep.
That's
A
the
large number of authors in the Russian classic literature were not just nobility, which is not that unusual for the period in other countries, because you need to be educated and so on and so forth. But many of them in Russia were not just nobility; they also were diplomats, state officials, uh, working
hmm,
somewhere in one of the ministries. So they were part of the system.
but they were part of the system. That's the whole
Yeah.
point.
Yep.
It's sort of like even what we're seeing today, right? I mean,
Yep.
there's a lot, right? All of the people that are connected to that. In fact, what sparked our whole reason for actually meeting up here on Substack together and talking about it was because we were talking about even TV series that are produced, right, in the United States. And I know Maddie and I and Dietmar have had discussions about this, saying, did you see this? Because obviously this is the only time that I have to watch anything at all. So, late night, very hot, okay, just pop something on. And I ran into, and this is absolutely incredible, For All Mankind. Then right after that, right, Star City. Dietmar, you mentioned The Diplomat, for example, which was another TV series that all depict the relations between the United States and the Russians or the Soviets or whatever at that time in a certain perspective, right? And that's what really is striking. And that perspective is something that comes from very far back, right, in time. You always see, for example, and then we'll get into the Chinese as well, because it's what is happening in Hollywood with the Chinese censorship is something that I did a bit of a deep dive, and it is actually truly shocking. We could call it censorship because that's exactly what it is. So, Madi, what do you think of All Mankind and Star City? There's a diplomat. I know that you have strong views on this. And Dietmar, then you can come on in as well.
Well, I won't get into details of the show For All Mankind, which is produced by Apple and available on Apple TV, much like Star City. Uh, but the whole premise of the show is very popular in Russia amongst the alternative history buffs.
Yeah.
What if we made it to the moon before the Americans? What if the Soviet Union never fell? Oh, such great things could have been accomplished. So when I was watching the show, I was hooked because I liked things from the American perspective.
Yeah.
But then when they increasingly started showing the Soviet Union in positive lights and their accomplishments, I shifted from interest to basically hate watching. I'm sorry. I wondered, where is this going? This is interesting. Who's paying for this? Obviously,
Yeah.
Apple is paying for it, but who produced this? It's interesting
Yeah.
because some of the people involved in this production were also involved in another show in the United States called The Americans.
Oh, Weisberg and
yeah.
Fields, the two of them.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. Also, because Weisberg actually stated publicly in an interview, I think it was either with NPR or PBS, he stated publicly, he said, I wanted to humanize them. I wanted to show that Russians are just like us. And this is the normalization, right? That
Yep.
you know, it goes on. Dietmar, you want to say anything or you have anything to add here?
No, only if Maddie is finished.
Yeah.
If
Just to quickly round up. Of course, I'm not trying to say we should dehumanize them and so on and so forth, but applying your Western lens, your Western standards and culture on a system and a way of life that is radically different to how we view the world or you view the world is just ridiculous. It just amounts to soft propaganda because most people don't actually understand how they view the world, what kind of entitlements or what kind of ideas they have. Of course, the Russians themselves don't view themselves as bad. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing many of those things. And psychologically, it's different to justify bad acts for anyone. But if For All Mankind is bad, Star City takes the cake.
Oh,
Yeah,
I mean, it's entertaining. If
it is
you
entertaining.
understand what the narratives are
Yeah.
and you understand where they're going, it's
Yeah.
just entertaining, right? It doesn't affect you as much. If
No.
you don't, right,
No.
then there's a problem.
Yes. I'm not going to talk about wild inaccuracies in terms of how the KGB operates or used to operate, because that show is a complete work of fiction, not grounded in reality. But also trying to portray each individual KGB agent as somebody who actually has noble intentions and not really self-serving, and it's just that life that changed them gradually is just no. Please don't do that.
It's rooted. It's not. Yeah. Well, it's the same with let's say the Americans was the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It was actually quite shocking. Dietmar?
Yeah. So first of all, why I'm so concerned about this topic is, first of all, we are talking about fiction. Yeah. So in fiction, there is more allowed than, let's say, in documentaries. Even if we know that documentaries, they take also a lot of liberties in some cases. So we are talking about fiction. And then we have, and this is what really worries me a lot, because we also have it in the discussion about our mainstream media. We have a strawman argument. We have a very strong strawman by the other side, by the people of the anti-Western movement. And I mean, in particular, the Chinese, the Russians, and the anti-Western people in the West. So far left, far right. And what they say, quote, the Russians are always portrayed as the bad guys in fiction, in movies, in 80s, 90s, 2000s. And when you take a deeper look, you find that first, not only that the Russians, that Hollywood is pro-Western propaganda, that Hollywood is pro-American propaganda. And I care a lot about politics and fiction because I'm not so much able to distract. So even if I distract myself, I'm still a little bit in observation mode. And let's go back to, let's say, to the 80s, where we had all these Reagan films. Like, take a look at Rambo 2. In Rambo 2, John Rambo, Vietnam veteran, goes back to Vietnam to rescue a couple of American hostages, so prisoners of war. And it's a very heroic thing, and he's the war hero. So it's quite a patriotic film. It's a stereotype of a patriotic film. But
Sure.
there is one thing about it. Even this stereotypical Reagan era film shows the government as something bad. The government is very bureaucratic, and they don't tell them the truth. They are hiding it. They are not really helping. And if you take a look, what kind of orders Rambo receives, he received the order only to take picture of the POWs and POWs. So it was not the order by the government to rescue the people. He did it as a loner.
Yeah.
So you see, even if you have the most patriotic message, the government is bad. And this is a patriotic film. This is not one of the critical films. So if we go further, if we go to the 90s, we have all the Oliver Stone flicks. We have 4th of July, where the Vietnam War is portrayed in one direction. It's an anti-war film. We have in the 70s, of course, before Apocalypse Now. Then we have also by Oliver Stone, who is, by the way, very close to Vladimir Putin. We know his documentaries. He know that he is very close to a couple of authoritarians, but especially Russia. He's also responsible for one of the most terrible Ukraine documentaries, and he's one of the most famous Hollywood directors. And Oliver Stone created the film something about, I don't know how the English title is, but it's about the assassination of President Kennedy. It is full with conspiracy theories. And many people take it very serious they take it. And what else do you have in the 90s? The X-Files. I loved it. It was so spooky. When the X-Files came out, I was 11 years old. It was amazing. But what was the message of the X-Files? The message was the government is hiding the truth. There are UFOs everywhere. Okay, forget about this maybe a little bit abstract thing, but the thinking, and we have in almost every political thriller, we have a conspiracy.
Yeah.
And you know who believes that there is a conspiracy everywhere? Conspiracy theorists. So they love this. And people have a problem to distinguish reality and fiction. And I don't have a problem that Hollywood creates these stories. Maybe if I would write a book, I would write a conspiracy or twists. People love twists. I also love twists. Sometimes when it's about movies, I think, when is the twist coming? But reality is different, which brings me to The Diplomat, which is one example of many, where you see on the beginning, everything points to the Russians. And I already knew, okay, if everything points to the Russian, it was something else. And this is exactly what they told us about MH17. They also said it's a different reality, only that everything is falsified and so on. And you have so many examples of films that are very harsh to the West, are very much into conspiracy theories. You have a lot of Oliver Stone. You have a lot of, let's say, leftist things. Or it doesn't matter if leftist or right-wing, but conspiracy theory thinking. And then we have the thing with China. You remember Red Corner with, as far as
I have a whole list of all
Red
of
Corner,
the films that were changed because otherwise China censors them.
We have 1997 Red Corner with Richard Gere. As far as I know, this was quite the last China critical Hollywood film because they wanted to sell movies in China. And then we had a situation that there was Red Dawn. Do you know Red Dawn from the 80s?
Yes.
The original Red Dawn, I think Patrick Swayze was there, or is a couple of quite later famous Hollywood actors. And of course, this is really ridiculous, but it was against the Soviet Union. There was a Soviet invasion in the US. It's quite entertaining. It's funny. Don't take it too serious. But then,
for Red Dawn, actually,
no,
they changed it. They had to change it to Korean, North Koreans.
Yeah.
They were Chinese originally.
But Monique, the original Red Dawn was about the Soviet invasion.
That's right, because this was a remake. You're absolutely
And
correct.
then the remake, and now it's exactly you you already told it. And they wanted to make a remake about a Chinese invasion, and they had to change it to a North Korean invasion, which
Yeah.
made it more ridiculous because North Korea just doesn't have the capabilities to invade the United States. Maybe the Chinese also, but it would be more realistic. So there are so many examples, and I have no doubt that we have content in Hollywood or on Netflix, which is Western view. And we have things, and we have, of course, cultural expert. We have all these things. But the phrase, the idea that Hollywood is a pro-Western propaganda tool, this is just not true. And
No.
I think there are a lot of examples that it's the opposite. And to be honest, I don't think that we need the Russians or the Chinese to influence this. We do it ourselves
Oh,
because
no.
we hate ourselves so much. We have so much conspiracy thinking and so much self-hatred. And I don't say it from a right-winger idea, but
No,
it's we think it's in arts. Arts must always self-hating in some
yeah.
degree.
It started, Dietmar, I think, and Madi, I don't know whether you agree or not. I think it started, things turned, I would say, with the war in Vietnam. That
Mhm.
was the moment when there was a lot of, first of all, investigation, because it was the first time that the actual art of journalism changed during that war. Due to, they weren't just there to report whatever the officials told them to report. They had started, there's actually one journalist in particular, his name escapes me right now, but he was the one that had started the investigative journalism that we see today. At that point, right, that's when, let's say, a very small niche, because a lot of people don't know this, but just pick up Paul Johnson's book. He pulls out all sorts of statistics and things. Most people actually did support the war in Vietnam. I know a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, but that's okay. That's what the statistics said at the conspiracy theories, Dietmar, you're absolutely right. They're just so convenient. I mean, they explain stuff that we can't explain, right? It's so nice to have something that is so neat, right? And in a narrative that everybody can understand and everyone, right, can get angry over. If we can think of it, maybe at this time, this is where we're seeing in social media, where social media works on anger and fear. And those films did the exact same thing, right? They're entertaining, they're emotional, and that, that has a lot of pull with a lot of people. But the conspiracy theory is fantastic. I mean, I just sit and I start laughing at them. But they are the bases of them are actually. I'm looking into it much more now. I mean, you have to go into oh dear, the end of times theories, all of that kind of thing, that are ancient, okay, in our world history, but a lot of them come from the narratives of the end of times. Okay, strangely enough. Um, but yeah, I mean, conspiracy theories, they're just people, unfortunately, look at film, and this is where I agree with you. They look at film and they think this is history, and it's not. This is just entertainment. That's the way you got to look at it. It's dangerous because there are some people that have the actual intent of pushing, right? The soft power of pushing narratives. I mean, the Americans used to do it, if you think about it, during the Cold War. This was done, let's say, how can I put it subtly? It was not overt propaganda that was sort of secondary propaganda, like, let's say a gray propaganda, let's just put it that way, where it was the lifestyle itself that attracted people. All right. They didn't have to put out propaganda messages. All they had to do was show middle America where people were going shopping, where you can buy a car, you can buy a house, you can live well. And this is what they sold. There was a great glossy magazine that the USSR permitted periodically, right, over time during the Cold War. They permitted this American magazine called America, okay, that was highly popular. They knew because they had people who were distributing them. They would see the magazine, and then amongst the elites, they all knew about it. And they loved the glossy paper, the pictures of what it looked like, things that, that they wanted. Or, I mean, I'm sure that they did get a lot of that stuff, at least the higher elites, because we know that they had
They did.
shops,
They
exactly,
did.
where they could go and buy. I mean, Maddie and I have talked long about, let's say, Italian film and Italian music and Italian products that were sold in Moscow for, a very, very long time, all throughout, right, the war itself. Where I think where you're absolutely correct on the self-loathing, there's also the part, let's say, with the Chinese. You talked about a lot of films, right? With the Chinese, this is, I would say, from about the early 2010s, around 2015, okay, is when um, that they started, let's say, an assault in the West through different forms of power, either soft power, hard power, and then sharp power, which is a combination of the two, based on a very aggressive foreign policy, which is basically the strategy is based on, they call it public opinion warfare, then there's psychological warfare, there's also legal warfare. And in that strategy, a lot of it had to, let's say, in order to connect with national publics abroad, and shape their perception of China, so on and so forth, they got into film because they knew that this was, a medium that works very well. I mean, we're basically, I think we started going into, especially with television and then all of like computers and internet and things like that, into a visual age where people are reading a lot less and they're looking at, film, pictures, but mostly now, especially with the internet, that's where we are. But the Chinese in that period, I think it was 2015, maybe a little earlier, began buying up, okay, portions of production houses. They're also financing films, building theater chains, that kind of thing. And Hollywood, in order to have a foot in China for distribution, because it's the second largest um, a market for film, right, in the world, they caved. Basically, they have censors uh, on the set telling them this is okay and this is not. You know, it even starts before that. The international production home distributors, they have their meetings with the Chinese before the film is even thought of for distribution, right? The Chinese give the okay on a lot of the scripts. You were talking about certain, let's say, certain films that were affected, okay, of this. I mean, I have a whole list here of films. We've got, for example, you mentioned Richard Gere, who was actually shut out of the big, huge. When's the last time you guys saw a film, Richard Gere? Big blockbuster film. He was one of the most uh, famous Hollywood actors. After Tibet, okay, after the film on that, nothing. He can't make any films. There are certain things that the Chinese will not permit you to add in your film, and that's Xi'an, Tibet, Hong Kong, um, Tiananmen, and I think there's another one as well. There's five of them. The five taboos. You are not allowed to mention them.
And
They
Richard Gere is
cannot
one
be
of the
mentioned.
taboos.
I think it's
Sorry?
I think it's the famine during the Cultural Revolution.
No,
No?
no, it's another geographical area. It's the five
Okay.
taboos. It'll come to me, okay, eventually. With Kundun, for example, okay, the film that basically is about the Dalai Lama. The Chinese authorities actually threatened Disney with that, and they said, let's say we're going to take away your rights here in China and close up your theme park if something isn't done. So what did they do? They pulled the advertising so that basically, okay, the film wouldn't get distributed. 2012, right? That film, we have humanity is being saved by the Chinese, right? The lifeboat, right? That comes in, if you guys remember. In Gravity with Sandra Bullock, we've got that, she survives because she gets herself to a Chinese space station.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got 2015 in the film of The Great Wall. Basically, they originally Pixel had said they were going to destroy the Great Wall. Instead, no. Okay, they were told, no, you can't do that. Top Gun. removed all the Japanese and Taiwan, that was the other one, all the Japanese and Taiwanese flags, right, from Tom Cruise's jacket. That's not allowed. We've got the remake of what you were talking about, where there were Chinese paratroopers. No, North Korea. All right, those were changed. Transformers, 2014, The Age of Extinction. Hong Kong apparently gets demolished. I haven't seen the film by robots. And then the Americans arrive to rescue the cities. No, it's not the Americans in the actual one that's released. It's the Chinese that do that. Um, and also, you have, let's say, there's another version as well of Transformers, where basically the Americans are always depicted, and this is what you were talking about, right, Dietmar? Corrupt. They're always corrupt. They're always incompetent, that kind of thing. And it's actually the Chinese that are the ones that are efficient and resolute, and they come in and save the day. Wolf Warrior 2, the same situation. Americans are the mercenaries. The Chinese are the ones who come to liberate the African tribes. Okay.
If I just add this thing, there
Yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
also biopics. There is one biopic with Tom Cruise where
Mhm.
he plays a CIA handler or CIA asset, and he is it's about the drug traffic in Central America. Do you know this film? How he travels with a plane. He's a pilot
Oh, it's
Yeah.
something about cocaine or whatever. He's bringing up cocaine.
Yeah.
for the
Uh,
CIA. He works for the CIA. It's one scandal from the 80s, huh? And
uh-huh.
you know what the difference is? The Chinese and the Russians, they don't do such stuff. They don't have self-critical movies. I mean, this is based on actual events, and it's great. We have this because our system allows and even supports some things. Maybe they get even a funding from the state for this, especially in Europe, by the way. And we have such films, but on the other hand, we have people that accuse the whole film industry doing the absolute opposite. And it's not true. And it changes so much in the perception of the people. But I take a look how the film. But please continue. I will just tell the audience.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, the Chinese, especially, just to wrap up this part about the Chinese, I mean, they see that this is penetrating all of those vectors. The way the Chinese work is that they have to control, and to a certain extent, the Russians do the exact same thing. Each of the, let's say, the critical nodes of the supply chain, right, in information that gets out there. So each of the players along the line have to conform to what they want. That's the way it works. So if you want, okay, your film to be placed in China, and by the way, right now, I think it's down to something like, I have a figure here. There are only 34 foreign films that are allowed in China per year. That's
Wow.
it. Yeah. And before there used to be 45%, okay, of foreign films, mostly American in the Chinese market. Now it's only 10%. And before they used to get a big cut, all right, from the distribution and what they actually brought in. And right now, of that 10%, they only get 25% back. So I don't understand what they're doing. They that desperate in order to get their products, let's say, placed in that market. The thing that really kills me is the actual censorship that is going on, where scripts are changed, words are deleted, characters are changed, simply to show, let's say, the whole uh, to to push the narratives that the Chinese want about themselves. They are the peace-loving people who are only trying to bring, populations together. If you just hop on, for example, China Daily, any of the, let's say, the media that's out there, Chinese state media, it's all state media. The same with the films, by the way. All of the big, huge Chinese production houses, producers of film, they're all subsidized, right, from the Chinese Communist Party. And by the way, the censorship is, before it was a government agency, now it's the actual Chinese Communist Party who send someone on the set. I don't know if I mean, that's absolutely incredible. This is a private, usually films are all private, right? And they have someone who's there from the Chinese Communist Party sitting there telling them yes, no, yes, no. That's what I'm talking about. That's the part that is incredible. I think the Russians just do it from the get go with the production. They
Oh yeah,
flood the zone
yeah.
with money for a film, okay, and there are a lot of them, actually, quite a lot of them. But I mean, their reach goes much farther than just films in Hollywood. We've got newspapers that receive funding from China, also journalists that do, and they're told exactly, okay, this is what you need to publish. You've got radio, for example. There are radio stations, even in Washington, D.C. There's a Chinese radio station. They're all over. Okay. And basically, this is all run out of the United Front Work Department because that's the actual department in China that takes care of all that. So that's that. Madi, you want to add anything to this that you know?
No, I don't know much about China, but it is, as you said, it's all done to get access to the market because it's not just the movie industry; it's also, I believe, the entire entertainment industry. So, computer games,
Oh yeah,
and
we
even
haven't talked about that.
yeah, and even software companies as well. Uh, that I think both Facebook and Google yielded to Beijing's demands just to get access to that market. Um, Not sure, quite sure how much money they're actually making there, but they did, and I think in their estimation was worth the trouble to go through all of that.
Yeah, yeah. But there is a vein. I agree with you, Dietmar. There is a vein. And it's sort of like we've put aside a lot of the values that we believe in and even on ourselves and just put those aside. Highly critical. I guess a film will make a lot more money if it's highly critical about something. Let's root it into maybe, something that will sell kind of thing. Conspiracy theory sells. All of those kind of narratives, they sell. People like to see sort of like the underdog that wins, right, against the big bad government, that kind of thing. And that's readily used also by, adversaries that take those kind of narratives and they just regurgitate them and put them back out and amplify them. That's been going on for quite a long time as well. We know. And by the way, it's not just the Chinese who tried that. In the 1930s, Hitler's Nazi Germany also asked Hollywood to make a few changes, and they did until the war, you know, until Pearl Harbor. Hollywood was doing that for the Germans, by the way. So it's not the first time. Dietmar?
It's just one thing that I remember, and that I think it's if you watch a film and you see, and I'm not talking about there are films that are unfortunately quite openly anti-Western. And let's talk about Oliver Stone, for instance. We talked about him before. So these films have a narrative, and there are a lot of more. And then we have some serious and we have some subtle messages. And then we have these films, and in my beginning statement, I already mentioned it, that are allegedly pro-Western. But if you take a deeper look, it's not even correct, because you see that you have also conspiracy theory thinking, anti-Western government thinking. And there is one website, it's not a website, it's actually a magazine by a Catholic, by a church-related entity. It exists since decades, and I think they have maybe a connection to the peace movement. And they review films since decades. And there was one film with Jean-Claude Van Damme from the 80s, and it's called Kickboxer. It is not a very political film, yeah, and it's a cheesy film and it's a trash film. So yeah, Jean-Claude Van Damme, from Belgium, and
Yeah.
the plot of the film is that his brother got injured in a fight against the Muay Thai fighter, and he wants revenge. And his brother is American, he's American, and then he trains there, and the whole film portrays
Oh,
Thailand, beautiful country. The trainer of Van Damme in this film is a Thai master. His girlfriend, the niece of the master, is also Thai. All the people, so it is a homage on how beautiful Thailand and Bangkok and everything is.
Right.
And then at the end, he wins, and the people are in favor of him. And the whole film, I never had thought that the film could be racist or something, yeah, because only one villain was Thai, but this makes sense because of the plot. So, and in this Catholic paper, it was written, this is a chauvinistic film, and of course, the American hero wins, the blonde hero. But the problem is, he's not blonde; he has brown hair. So they did not even watch the film. They had already their mind. So it was so ridiculous. And
Yeah.
they wrote in this that this film was because they want to. Oh God, how to explain this in English? It's even in German it would be. So it's because of the Vietnam drama. What the hell?
Yeah.
Thailand is not
That's
Vietnam.
always there. There's
That
always
makes
the
no
Vietnam.
sense. We
I'm
have
telling
Asian
you.
people. It's about the appearance, but this is how primitive they were. So this film had nothing to do with Vietnam. And now comes it. Even there is one thing. There is an American that the hero meets there, and this American he meets in a bar. It's a black guy who said he left to Thailand because he was somewhere else because there were some weapons dealings for the guys of the CIA. Yeah, this is how he mentioned it. So
Oh God, yeah.
this film was not only a tribute to Thailand, it was also very critical of the CIA and the arms trade CIA thing. So there was nothing bad about this film, but of course, this Catholic anti-American entity, they spread the propaganda about the film, said it's chauvinistic, it's racist, it's about Vietnam War revenge or something like that. And this is, you see how distorted the discourse about Hollywood films is, even about this ridiculous. It's a B movie, yeah, but it's for me it's a very interesting case, and we have a lot of others, and you cannot imagine what they say about Richard Gere, 1997, Red Corner. What the same
Oh wow.
magazine they say, yeah, the whole film has only the purpose to make the Chinese legal system look bad or something like that. The Chinese system look bad because it is bad. It's a dictatorship. It's a dictatorship. Do you
It
wonder
is.
why do we distort it? And you
Sorry,
know,
I'm
you mentioned
laughing,
a
but it's
couple of
absolutely
films,
hilarious.
and I also saw a film uh, about some conspiracy and some political thriller, also from a Western, I think UK or American made. And also on the end, he was rescued at the Chinese embassy. Richard Gere was rescued when he arrived at the American embassy. Now, 20 years later, we have the message you are rescued when you are at the Chinese embassy.
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. And nobody remembered. Well, I mean, it really jars with that poor guy that was in front of the Chinese embassy in London, where they were trying to, haul him in. Remember that guy that was protesting outside? This was
Yeah.
maybe about a year and a half ago during the summer, protesting outside of the Chinese embassy in London, and they tried to abduct him, bring him right in. Because
No.
that's another thing too that we're missing out in this discussion. There's a whole Chinese diaspora that they work on very heavily, right? They're you know they work on their media and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, the favorite bad guys are the CIA, right? And how many of us, except for me, how many of us have actually studied in depth the way the actual agency works, or how many people actually work for the agency, right? But in films, it seems like there are I mean, it comes, I guess, with being a superpower, right, over time. So you have to demonize, right, one of the superpowers, and it's always the United States in that case. I mean, obviously they've done a lot. I can't excuse certain things, but it's a lot easier to criticize the United States because if you try to criticize either Russia or China, good luck. That's basically, the actual thing. I'm just gonna look up exactly to see how many people actually work for the CIA. They can't tell you. I
Yeah,
wouldn't have
you're not
to
gonna
find
find
that.
out.
I would not find that. I would not find that. But, yeah. Or the FBI. Okay, it's always, right? Something of that.
With the
Because
FBI,
it's
you
an
can get
open
a
society.
good
United
estimate.
States are sorry?
With the FBI, you can get good estimates. I don't think it's a secret.
Yeah. Yeah, no, CIA, no. But I mean, the thing is that our societies are open societies. We allow, right? I mean, it's part of our culture. You can criticize. Something goes wrong, well, you're there and you can say whatever you want to say. In other cultures, that's simply not possible, and they take advantage of that, right? To put all sorts of narratives that just distort completely, a lot of historical facts, just like you were saying with JFK. I mean, I didn't know much about that kind of thing. When you see the film, it looks very convincing, but it's a film, right? It's not history. We don't know, right? All of the facts and everything. It's very comfortable for a lot of the conspiracy theorists to be able to just take that and run away with it, kind of thing. Madi, the intent. One thing that I think that we should press here, because it looks like now we're looking at this in a specific way. There was propaganda. We know that during the Cold War, the United States did have propaganda operations going on. So did the British. It was a very specific context, right? Of two different systems that had clashed during that period in a Cold War. All right. The intent, though, the two intents were different, in my view. That's the difference, is that one seeks to, let's say, expand rights, expand, right, democratic rule where you have people who actually get to vote in their governments. This is an actual, let's say, a value that we hardly ever talk about. But our governments are representative of us. It's not that we've got a dictator at the head and everyone is subservient to the dictator. Now, it doesn't always work perfectly, obviously. All right. I mean, we're not living in a utopia world. Um, but the big differences between the intents of the two. Getting back to what we were talking about right from the Comintern, the Comintern was there in order to spread world revolution, their brand of world revolution, which is really just, Soviet or Russian expansion. That's basically it. We can look at it that way. And it was in conflict, right, with what they saw as a system of capitalism, although they adopted it themselves, just made it for the very rich right up at the top. That's basically it. Do you agree, Madi, that it's the two intents that were completely different?
Yes. So, and what's the purpose of propaganda? Is basically to achieve some kind of strategic goal eventually, or aid in achieving a specific strategic goal. In case of the Soviet Union, and even Imperial Russia before that, the strategic goal was ever present and ever continuous expansion of either Tsarist Russia or expansion of the Soviet Empire. So immediately as soon as the revolution happened, well, not immediately, but very soon the Russian so-called civil war kicked off, and it was not exactly civil war simply because there were many factions that were fighting for independence from the Russian Empire.
Hmm.
But the propaganda machine started to kick off immediately, where they were not portraying the opposing parties as somebody who's fighting for independence. Obviously, you're not going to do that. There were bandits. There were uh, there were highway robbers. They were not an organized movement. They were just there because they're criminals and bad people. And it's kind of interesting because this is the same message that we're trying to apply to Ukraine when the
Yeah.
full-scale invasion kicked off. We're not saying they were fighting the Ukrainian people or an organized force. They were saying that they were fighting roving bands of Nazis and all this kind of
Yeah, you're right.
nonsense. It's not new. They do it in every war. Same happened with the
Yeah.
Russian invasions of Chechnya. They were not fighting an organized military that was put together by a group of people that were looking to gain independence, that were put together by foreign terrorists and bandits and drug addicts and so on and so forth. So nothing new. But going back to the idea of propaganda, s- and the Soviet Union did the same. They applied propaganda to the Poland. They gained independence from the Russian Empire. They didn't really have enough force to invade Finland, which gained independence. So they delayed it until it went to war. But what was the propaganda message there? The Finnish proletariat is being oppressed by the government in Helsinki. We need to go and help our communist brothers. It was not Russian imperialism. It was just
No,
going
it's
to
dressed
assist.
as
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
And
it's dressed up as.
a few decades later, just over 40 years later, they did the same thing in Afghanistan. What's happening in Afghanistan? Oh, it was the Afghan people, the proletariat, is being oppressed. They're expressing their desire for socialism and eventually communism. So we need to go and assist them.
Yeah.
So it's the same idiotic message. I'm sorry. I'm saying idiotic because sure, hindsight 2020. If you're not living in the system and looking from the outside, it's very obvious nonsense.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're not in the system, that's the whole thing, is that they paint things the way that they want you to see them,
Yes,
right? This is
exactly.
their thing. And as you said before, was the mirror imaging.
Yeah.
So basically, they're just projecting what they think, right? What we think of them, but is really what we are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In that way, it's a mirror image. It's not. It's not what the actual reality is. Now, this is not to discount, for example, also in the beginning of the Cold War, 1953, 1954, if you have things that went on in Guatemala, you've got stuff going on in Iran. There's a lot of things where Americans were involved, along with the British and the French, let's say, in shoring up uh, political parties and movements that would be friendly towards the United States, right? That
Yeah.
would be okay, and we know that is the case. In Chile, that was something that Nixon really wanted. I can tell you that the CIA was not in agreement with that. There's lots of documentation that came out afterwards. There are other things that happen. We know also of American operations that were going on in Nicaragua. We know about this stuff. So and that's something that's actually interesting, because I remember a long, long time ago in a discussion all about this. I do have to say that it is American historians that have brought a lot of this information forward, as much, let's say, as balanced as they can. Balance is a terrible word, but according to documentation, what do we see? What do we have, right,
Yeah.
of what they've done? But it was not. I mean, with the Russians, it was a concerted effort from 1919 with the Comintern that they were going to penetrate all of the Western world in order to aggrandize themselves. That was basically their goal, right?
Yeah.
And they used every single thing that they could do, including with the first operations of the trust operation, which kind of gives you an idea, okay, of how far they would go. We're going to
But
wrap it up. Oh, go ahead.
that operation itself, especially many of the
Well,
early operations of the NKVD, were quite instructive because many of the Russian imperial officers were being oppressed, quote unquote, oppressed in Soviet Russia at the time, who managed to flee to the West.
yeah,
Were quite happy to work for the new Soviet government because uh, their actions, they were not exactly betraying the Tsar. The Tsar was dead anyway. They were still serving the Russian Empire, just in a different
yeah,
form.
yeah, yeah. It's the trust operation is the foundation for all of the other operations, sabotage and covert operations that there were afterwards. That was the foundational, let's say, operation it was. If you don't know about it, there's some great literature out there, just to give yourself a read. I don't know if there are any films on it or not. I'm not sure
There are
whether
way too
anybody's
many
actually
characters
tackled it.
involved. You would actually have to shoot a
Yeah,
TV
no, it's
series.
really complicated.
Yeah.
It's true. I've gone through, the actual, the one of the few people that actually put it down all on paper. Very difficult read, and because it's just full of so many different characters, historical figures, that pop up. But that's the foundation of it all. And that's something
Uh,
that.
is the CIA reading room website still functioning? Because I heard there were.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the CIA World Book is not.
Okay,
The fact
so
book, the
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 reason I'm
World
bringing it
Fact
up,
Book is not.
So, if for any conspiracy theories, theorists out there, if you go on the website of the CIA reading room, there is I think a 50 or 60 page document on that operation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
read it there for free.
Yeah. It's a thin little thing. You can actually download it.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, I have it in two different versions, but anyway, that's the thing. There's also a great book as well, called Disinformation by Natalie Graham, and
Yep.
that's the person who put it all together with her husband's notes
Yeah.
and her own input.
Oh, yeah.
Probably
So, a little disclaimer,
Mhm.
this 50, 60-page document on the CIA website includes a lot of names, but it doesn't include any background or history on them. It's just bare bones information about the operation. But
Yeah,
the Raga book goes into all the
yeah,
characters, what kind of
yeah,
other operations they were involved in the
yeah,
past, how
yeah,
they're linked to all the other characters. So it's a very
yeah,
long and difficult read. So
yeah,
it takes a
yeah.
while to go
Dense.
through.
It's
Yeah.
really, really dense because it is. That's what I'm saying. You know, Dietmar, you brought up the conspiracy theories. Theories are simplistic. They show you a vision that you're comfortable with because, first of all, it reflects what you already think. First of second of all, it's all neat. It's all packaged perfectly, right? All the different pieces somehow miraculously fit together. And, to come up with this huge solution. This is it. This is the person. And it's usually, either the CIA or it's, the deep state, okay, or the globalist agenda is what we're seeing now. If you pick up a book on exactly these operations, the different people that are involved, you will realize that it's much more complex in anything. All right. So it's not all really neat, and our world is not okay that well organized. Let's just put it that way. I mean, really, you're absolutely right. This book in particular, which is one of the foundational books that you should read about disinformation if you're really interested in it, to get right down to do a deep dive into it. It'll take you a while because it is truly dense with information, background, right? Networks, all the different people that are involved, different geographical areas, all the different agencies, spy agencies that were out there at the time. We're talking about 1924. Well, really started to 1924, if I'm not mistaken. So this was a huge operation, and it involved so many different intelligence agencies from different European countries, and all sorts of people going back and forth, from Moscow into these areas. So, and it was also revealed in the press. I won't get into it as much, but we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. It's called disinformation. It's actually called disinformation. I wish I had it here with me. Um, and it is a foundational. It's one of the foundationals. If you're going to start, that's what you start. That kind of thing. But anyway, I guess Dietmar, you want to finish? You want to wrap it up for us?
No, there's one thing that concerns me since forever, but especially in the last days, because we have quite some not issues, but we see it's quite challenging to communicate. I mean, if we speak about cognitive warfare, FIMI, foreign interference, whatever you want to call it, um, I see that we have a problem because I think all of us, all the experts and the people who really go deeper, I think it is not so difficult to communicate that we have a problem, that Russia, China, Iran, that they use cognitive warfare, that they use disinformation campaigns from outside, for instance, via social media. But I think it's much more difficult to convince people that we have enemies from within who collaborate with these evil foreign forces. Yeah, I totally. I know it's a regular rhetoric which I use, but
Ah,
but this is not new. It was active measures, KGB operations,
the
um,
inside threat.
agents of
Yep.
influence. We know a couple of names. I think we know only the tip of the iceberg. We still need to think about the Cold War to expose all the agents of influence, but the KGB archives are not open. They closed it, and they know why.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is for you, but when I speak to people who are really very critical about Russia, about the Kremlin, very supportive of Ukraine, then it always ends up in, yes, it's the far right. And yes, some people have no clue. And I say, no, they don't have a clue. It's not about not having a clue. They are maybe part of an information operation,
They don't even
consciously or
know. Yeah.
unconsciously. And we know that this is very important, that the social design agency, they identified people
Mm.
in the West, not people who receive money, but people who say exactly what the Kremlin wants to hear, to amplify them. They also identify the good voices. And now I'm not even talking to the people who are paid by China, Iran, the Kremlin, Russia. So I think this is so important, this topic about all these proxies and these people who are not Russian and not Chinese, who are genuine Europeans, Americans, Canadians, Australians, Japanese. And this is so difficult because maybe because I don't know, why is it so difficult to, is it because it's hard to look from
Mhm.
within? Is it because it's freedom of speech, or
Well, you know what? I've thought about this a long time, Dietmar, because we had raised this also in other conversations, right? Between the three of us, but also with other people as well. I think it's because, um, our relations, and this is something that I picked up with Madi not too long ago, our relations with, let's say, from the Russian Empire, even before, right, the Soviet Empire. There are families, there are people that are in positions of power, there are people that, even in the press, so on and so forth. We're going back generations where the relations have always been this. They're business people who have constructed whole, let's say, business empires by doing business with Russia. The only time, let's say, up until just think of it this way, up until 2022, most of European business people were doing contracts with Russia. We were all doing it. Okay. So there wasn't a distinction made. Oh, hold on a minute. I mean, there wasn't with a certain number of people who the Russians already tried to confiscate their businesses. We know about them. They were talking about, the way Putin was, let's say, veering after 2007, right, towards a certain direction that we know after Munich, right, after Munich the Security Council meeting, conference. Um, but I think for the most part, the mentality, and I see this in my own workplace, I see it with everywhere I go. They've always had this image, and we go back to what we started with, an image of what Russia is and has always been. And they don't look at it as much as, let's say, as a threat. Not from our perspective, let's say in North America or in Western Europe. There are very few countries, and they're the countries that have had the Soviet experience. Those are the countries that are a little more vociferous. But Dietmar, you're sitting there in Vienna. Vienna was a hotspot, right? Okay, you guys were neutral during that time, but it was a hotspot for spying. I mean, there are so many there. It's sort of,
Was
we haven't, yeah. uh, okay, it still is, yes. Probably even more today than it was in the past, but I mean, there's always been sort of this way of looking at Russia. Okay. Again, it's the mirror image that we choose to give it to it. This is not the reality of what it is. So all of these people that are working, they see nothing wrong with it. You see what I mean? They see nothing wrong with this. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. It's not like you or I or Madi that we're into this kind of stuff. Other people don't look at it that way. They look at you from near the moon. Oh, really? Oh, didn't know that. And there are people that are doing it even unconsciously, unwittingly, if we can use one of the terms, that have been used and used and used in the past. So I'm not surprised. I'm really, really not surprised. And I don't think it's going to change. I honestly don't think this is going to be a very difficult thing to do until you've got changes that are happening from, let's say, generational, where you have a generation of kids growing up where they actually read about, the history of Europe in a different key, with a different frame. Because right now they're not, they're still looking at the Soviets who were heroic. Okay. And there's nothing is written about the colonization that they undertook from the get go into populations. Or how about, Madi, we've talked about many times about, the genocide in Kazakhstan, for example, right? In the 1920s. Nobody talks about all of those countries that tried to separate itself. All right, in the 1920s, in the early 1920s, there were several conflicts that were going on. And the Russians, the Soviets just, bulldozed in, killed off, all right, all of their governments. But this is not something that is talked about in or taught. It's not taught at, levels, let's say, in normal education, all the way up into university. You have to get into specialized literature. And even then, oh
Highly
no, well, we've
specialized,
got
I'd
to
say,
read. We've
because
got to read.
yeah, because even if you, I don't expect something like that to be taught in high school in Europe, because let's face it, an average kid doesn't should know it, but probably not going to know it, and not going to be willing to learn it. But when it comes to actual experts on Russian history and Russian culture and so on and so forth, they when they do their undergraduate or master's or even PhD, they frequently use materials that were written by people with a more Russian inclination, or that were written by the Russians themselves. So they are already looking at an edited version of history that fits Moscow, and it's highly problematic. And I've encountered it myself many times before, and
Mm.
it's
Firsthand.
yeah. Sometimes it does feel like fighting
So
windmills.
have I.
Yeah,
So have I. Yeah.
Now, when I
Yeah.
check all books, you see the history and even geography books. It's always about what the Western world did wrong. It's about the colonialism. It's just the Western things, even in our school system, but also in these post-colonial studies that we have at the universities. It's a very anti-Western ideology. They don't speak about Russian colonization,
No.
colonialism. They don't speak about what the Chinese did, what the Mongols did, what the Arabs did. This is all excluded. It's only about
that's yeah,
everything connected to the West.
that's the problem. So if you take anything away from the conversation today, colonialism is not just when you hop on a boat and go someplace else. It can also be just crossing a line next door. That's it. It's simple
Yeah.
as that.
Yeah. Basically.
The current
Yeah.
invasion by Russia into Ukraine is technically could be classed as a colonial war, because they're there to retake the land that they colonized before, and the reason they want to do it because they want to exploit the land, they want to exploit the resources, but most importantly, they want to exploit the people, especially those that they don't kill
Yep.
eventually.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
It
They even
doesn't
want a
mean
puppet regime. They want a part of the land they want to integrate into their empire, and
yeah,
the other part they want to have a puppet regime. This is a classic example of colonial
exactly.
war.
Yeah, but it's
So
not framed. We all know it's not framed that way.
no,
I mean, we use this kind of language. Everybody jumps on you. I put just as a note before I forget, in the chat, I put the name of Illa Thompson. She's a professor who wrote about Russian colonialism. One of the few scholars. So I invite you to either read or watch. She's got also some lectures that she's done on YouTube, for example. And you can go and listen to her and what she says. That I find absolutely fascinating. And I learned a lot from her books, and also from whatever she's published on there. But I cut you off, Madi. What did you want to say?
no, I've pretty much finished. But yeah, the Russian colonialism. If you go look for books on it, I actually did an experiment. I went to a bookstore here in London. I asked for, "Do you have anything on Russian colonialism?" I was offered a book with a tiny section on Russian America. Like, no,
Ah,
colonialism is not when you hop on a boat and that's it. Russian colonialism kind of started outside of immediately when they started conquering neighboring states. So, but there was none
well,
of that.
I mean, let's go back to Catherine the Great, but let's
No.
not go back.
Whoa, even back, even before.
Well, even
No,
before there, but I
yeah.
think the big expansion was under her, right? That's the, let's say, the
Uh,
from what I've read.
yes. But even before that, they had the Siberian expansion. So the Khan of Siberia fell territory-wise. That was the biggest expansion in absolute terms. But it wasn't done uh, immediately, as many assume, or some historians try to entertain that notion. It was done over many years, over decades.
Yeah.
And it was done primarily through trade initially because Russian merchants went into those lands through fur trade. And through fur trade, they
Mhm.
realized how the political system was set up, and they relayed information back home, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, yeah.
So whenever people trade these days with Russia, keep in mind the information goes both ways. So whatever you tell them, it doesn't doesn't mean that they're not going to relay them to their intelligence services, even if you
And
think you're dealing
others.
with private individuals.
No, and others as well. As well.
Exactly. Yeah.
Dietmar, your last thoughts, because we're a little over time. Your last thoughts.
So what we have, and just to wrap it up into only two thoughts, is we have a whole system of domestic and foreign interference of our democratic system, of our value system, and there is only one message: we are the bad guys. And this message
Yeah.
is very strong, and it's coming. And back in the days, it was coming from the far left, or even from the left, and now it's coming from the far right. But the far left, they never changed. And we should never think that they changed. The peace movement and the tankies, they are still the same, even if Moscow is not the Soviet Union anymore. But now they have China also very strongly involved. And there is an additional change. Not only do we have the far right now, we also have China and Russia in the propaganda way very much more aligned. Yesterday, I read a book from the 70s, and it was about our topics about the peace movement,
Mm,
about
mm,
the so called peace research. And you know what? In this book, the guy wrote, we need to be careful because the far left is also admiring China, or China is also, we should not forget about China, even if China and Russia are at the moment in a strong competition and conflict. And I thought, oh my God, now we don't even have this conflict. They are very close. I mean, of course, there are economic things and strategic things, but in general, if it's about the propaganda and about the anti-Westernism, they are in perfect alignment. And if we take a look how weak our societies are now, we are zero resilient. Even our cultural products, Hollywood, fiction, everything is in a kind of weird way anti-Westernized.
yeah.
And it, it's completely okay to have self-critical things to explain the past, but it should never serve autocratic systems. And at the moment it does, and also
Yeah.
these post-colonial studies, we can talk very serious and very critical about our history. But if at the moment, if some dictator, it doesn't matter if in Asia, in Africa, or in South America, gets more views on his page, more success in his elections, or more political power, then it becomes a problem. And it is exactly this. It serves the dictators, and we
Yeah.
serve dictators with our self-hate.
What thing? Sure, because it's actually rooted in an anti-liberal, right? And I'm talking about liberalism in the true sense of the
Yeah,
word.
in the European sense. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Anti-liberalism, anti-capitalism, because that's the root, let's say, of either the far right and the far left. Both of actually
Yeah.
more in the far left. That's why it started there, as you were saying, and then it migrated, right, and from a populist, conservative populism that had its mix of ideologies and different things thrown in there. Okay, this has been a big discussion, and we tried to make it light. We're not really good at that kind of thing. So wanted to thank everybody. I saw some messages in the chat, so thanks, guys, for putting those in. And don't forget, just write a message. I know I'm not a lot on Eurofile. It's not that it's closed down or anything, but we've got projects going on, so very time consuming. And if I want to put out a product or information for you, I want it that it's the best possible form and not just something just thrown out there and that's it. So forgive me for that one. But Dietmar, thanks for coming along and thanks for the chat. What we do in our own chat, this is something that we brought out on there. And Madi, you have a great night. Thanks, Leslie. Thank you. All right, and you have a great evening. I hope it cools down.
Yeah.
What are you at now?
37 in my apartments, so it's probably 33 outside. Yeah.
Oh.
because it's usually
okay.
4 degrees difference. Yeah.
Oh, oh, okay. All
Yeah.
right. No, let's just leave it at that. It's just
Yeah.
been the horrible, horrible summer in that thing. Okay, guys. Thanks everybody, and we'll wrap this up. Bye bye. Bye everyone.
Thanks for
Okay.
having me.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye.